Just need one panelist, Monica, to enter the stage because it's about time to start. And I would like to welcome you all to this session entitled Energy Efficiency in Buildings, Deep Renovation, People and Health. And yes, the IEA conference was about the high-flying political level. And in those sessions and in this conference, we want to learn from concrete examples, how to implement it on the ground and how to get to a quick and bold implementation. And the IEA also has done a great job in the recent years of introducing the idea or the narrative of multiple benefits of energy efficiency. And this should be one of the topics we are talking about, because when it comes to it, it's not just climate protection, it's also connected with economic benefits, of course, welfare and positive health effects when we talk about building renovation. And yes, therefore, I'm very happy to have three excellent panelists with me. It's Tina Mein, she's Senior Vice President for the products of Velux. It's Mr. Lars Knark, he's CEO of Novenco Building and Industry, and it is my good friend Monica Frassoni, which is president of our EU sister organization, the Alliance to Save Energy, or EUAs shortly. I'm not Francesco from Eurovent, so he got stuck somehow in traffic or something, and yes, I'm happy to have been invited to jump in and to improvise a little my moderation. And my name is Christian Noll, I'm Managing Director of DENEV. We are an organization of more than 200 companies in Germany in the field of energy efficiency in buildings and industry. Yes, one practical information. This discussion is streamed online via DI's and Danfoss YouTube channels. And yes, I would like to invite you for a first round, tour de table, of quick presentations by each panelist about his case or example, how to reduce energy and how this can have not only positive effect on climate, but also on welfare and health of people. And I would say I would like to invite Tina to have a start on that.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'm Tina Mein, I'm with Velux. I'm very pleased to be here today and actually talking about solutions, because that's what I work with. I don't know if you know where the name Velux comes from, but it's actually combined of two things. It's combined of VE, which stands for ventilation, and the other word, lux, stands for light. And within this space, we actually try very much to find solutions also addressing energy. And the case that I will like to talk a little bit about is beyond energy as such, because buildings, we know we have in Velux now over the last few years and just lately also worked on our Healthy Home Barometer, which we've done with RAND, a big research institute in Europe, because we all know that 90% of our time we spend in buildings. We also know more than ever after the corona lockdowns that the time we spend inside the buildings is extremely important, not only from an energy perspective, but also from a health perspective. Through our Healthy Home Barometer and studies, we've found that actually 1 out of 3 homes are not healthy inside. The climate inside is not healthy. So what we would like to address and discuss, and I would like to discuss here, is of course, what are the solutions also to create a healthy home? Not only an energy efficient home, but also a healthy home and a sustainable home for the future. And that's where we work with solutions that use the LE or the VE and the LUX, so the ventilation from the nature, just bringing fresh air in from the outside or light in from the outside, creating and addressing the challenges that we have today in the homes. So that's the case that we're bringing forward here. One of the 2 major issues that there is with the health in the homes is humidity, and it is fungus in the homes, where very simple actions like ventilation is actually helping the homes. So that's the case.
Thank you, Tina, for this introduction. So, and Mr. Knack, I guess you will also speak about ventilation, but a different solution towards that.
More energy, yes. No. I'm Lars Knack, and I'm representing Novenco Building and Industry, and we are moving air for a greener and for a safer world. And the greener is the energy efficiency, and the safer is when we are doing smoke extract. So we are doing smoke extract from buildings and from car parks and tunnels and things like that. We have been developing energy efficient fans for 75 years now here in Denmark, and are based in Denmark but are working internationally. The latest innovation, we have a fan now that is called the Xerox Fan that are 92% efficient in the fan itself. That means that the fan will turn 90% of the power into air movement. So that is, and that goes actually in a wide range of the fan, so that it's not only specified for the max capacity or the max load, but in a wide range that we are very efficient. So even when you drive the fan up and down, you will still have efficiency. Besides that, and that we are delivering to a large amount of industries and also to buildings, and especially industrial buildings, offices, and that type of buildings, but also residential high-rises. And also to other things, data centers and so on, all cooling needs. We are focusing also more broadly on sustainability, and I think that is one of the points here is that we are designing our fans for 20 years lifetime. So that means that we will stay in the building for 20 to 25 years at least. And a lot of buildings today are at least designed for that or more. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to change the fan 5-6 times over the lifetime of... Another thing is also the recyclability. Our fans is made from steel and from aluminium, so a lot of it can be reused after use. So we actually have documented 98% reuse of our fan after end lifetime. So yesterday we heard a lot about the cooling needs, especially for Southeast Asia and India also. And that's actually, we made a case in Singapore together with Danfoss a couple of years back. It was that Danfoss had, the municipality of Singapore had made a contest where they want to see, okay, what could they do with a building, an old office building that they want to refurbish into more energy efficiency. And they had the university also in working on that, and they took all different solutions. Could be windows, that could be water use, everything in, and they decided at the end to change also among, I think, 5 or 4 solutions. The fan solution was one of the giving them the most energy efficiency into the building. And also coming back to the indoor climate is also that with having a very, I mean, the fan, especially in mechanical ventilation, is the heart of ventilation. And having an energy efficient fan can also drive so that you can have more air into the building, and you can also have changed the air more and still at a very low power consumption.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, ventilation stands past pro toto for how can buildings become more efficient or in the long run carbon neutral. But of course, one cannot build a complete house out of fans. Maybe you could build it out of windows, but then it's a glass house where nobody wants to live in, except you're a plant or something. But still, Monica, you're accompanying the energy efficiency debate since many years on a political level. Sometimes I get the impression that policymakers are very keen to know about, is there the one solution of energy efficiency? So can hydrogen or heat pumps or something save the world, or is it ventilation? What's your point of view on that?
Certainly not hydrogen, but that we can discuss. No, actually, I wanted to say that there are many silver bullets as far as energy efficiency is concerned, and this is also our effort to make sure that in a building you have different solutions, and also to bring all the different businesses which are interested in these solutions to work together towards policymakers and towards legislators. And very recently with Justina, we, from the very, very newly established Polish organization, Fala Renovacji, we went to see the innovation institution agency in Warsaw, and guess what? They made a big presentation about ventilation, and they told us that they found out that in reality, even an insulated building, since in absence of a good ventilation system, people would just open the window, and the capacity of that building to be energy efficient would basically go down the drain. So I think that this, for me, was a perfect demonstration on how public authorities are understanding that it is not possible just to go only for one solution, but that you have to foresee and to facilitate the integration of different ones. And this is maybe under a financial, but also under a policy making and a legislation point of view, something that we need to pursue, and for which we need absolutely the support of industry, able to work together. And by the way, if I may, this is going to be one of the most important messages that the initiative that we are going to do on the 13th of October, Energy Efficiency Day, to which also Velux will participate, will try to convey. We need to work with many silver bullets and not only one.
Okay, interesting. So I would maybe like to ask you back as manufacturers. So when you are doing your marketing activities or doing your communication, are you just talking about your product, or in how far has maybe even this broadened up to say, okay, it's a part of the solution and this combination makes sense? So of course you're not selling out your solutions on the ground, as far as I know. It's more installers who do that, but do you train them or give them guidance somehow?
Of course, we give them guidance, and I think back to your question before, could you just make a house out of glass? Yeah, of course you could, if you could heat protect it and then also use the opportunities both with mechanical and natural ventilation. But back to your point, I think it's the integration now, and I think from the previous session also within the building is the combination of several solutions. That's the answer here, because mechanical ventilation can do a lot, but there is also natural ventilation which can do even more, and it's a free resource out there that doesn't have any impact at all. And we many times when we look at the buildings, only look at the energy usage. We don't look at all the other elements, the people in the building. It is actually the people inside the building that's the important ones. And how do we make the building a nice place to be? Because we spend 90% of our time in there. And that's of course through daylight. And it's of course through also using the natural ventilation. We have an example from Italy, which I think is very relevant for you, where now in all public buildings and all schools, they're not allowed to put the air conditioning below 25 degrees. That was just put in motion here last month. So 25 degrees. Now, by opening the window, you can actually reduce the temperature with 2 degrees. We have made several studies on that. 2 degrees, you can bring the temperature down.
I tried that by myself. It works.
Yeah. Yes, it does work, but it's back to these small things that can actually make a major difference. Yeah,
yeah, of course. But if you leave the air conditioning or the heating on, then of course the impact on energy efficiency is relatively smaller. Yeah. So I think that that is the point of the integration of technologies, of solution, together with a regulation that makes them easier, basically, to install.
Yeah, you have the smart building coming in.
So your products are ready to interact with other components of the buildings?
Yeah, we are moving air, and we are doing it in the most efficient way. So I mean, it's just you just need to know how much air you need. So
okay, no, we just talked about consumers and consumer behavior, and an engineer comes and builds the ideal building, and then people move in, and it's operated completely different, and the technologies are there to do so. But also, what are your innovations? So a window is a window. Just still a thing which consumers open and close and maybe do it right or wrong, or can technology help? And how far gets your, like I would say, passive window more active maybe?
Yeah. But of course, new technology will help and is helping, because we know for a fact that consumers, they do not open their windows, whether it's in an industrial building or if it's in a residential
They rather
home.
don't ventilate.
They do, yes.
Yeah.
They don't. I mean, take a teenage room, for example, that is never ventilated. The CO2 levels in that room is just horrendous. And the studies that we've done even indicates that if 1 out of 3 homes are not healthy to live in, if you take a teenage room, it's even worse.
Yeah.
And actually by using
Very
technology,
vivid example, yeah.
and actually by using technology and automating this with sensors, you can actually take over that responsibility. And of course, then back to the discussion earlier, you can integrate with other systems so that you shut off your air conditioning when you open the window in order to get a good indoor climate. And that you can do with sensors. And of course, we're doing that so that we take over that part for the consumer so that they don't have to worry about it. It's automated. And I think that's a little bit back to maybe your question also on behavior, because it's all about how we change behavior. And the behavioral change is not quite there yet when you talk about buildings and energy efficiency. And it's not going to only come through legislation. It has to come through us changing our behavior and how we use the buildings. But we can also nudge through sensors, we can nudge through information.
And in addition, changing behavior is the cheapest way to save energy. Yeah?
Definitely.
Yeah, but I think especially in building and especially in larger building, office buildings, residential buildings, it's normally not, I mean, you have a contractor, you have the people that needs to use the building, and then you have the building owner. And it's always this triangle of finding out, so you need some kind of regulations to secure that we are getting the right systems inside the building and getting the right specification in, because it's always this triangle working.
What's the role of regulation then, Monica?
Well, I think that I was just thinking about this triangle, if you want. But you know, the regulation is there in order to orientate behaviors, certainly, but also investments and products. Yeah. And we know very well that, for example, some legislation like eco-design or the Energy Efficiency Directive or other things have prompted, you know, more awareness, certainly. Although you can argue that the oil crisis in the 70s, you know, when we were small, or some of you were not even born, was also very much for you know, pushing savings. And I believe that there is today a very different approach. In those moments, it was obvious to talk about energy efficiency. Here, the discussion, I don't know if you notice, at least for the moment, is let's try to find other sources, you know, gas, renewables, etc. So this idea of, well, first let's save energy is not that much into the public discourse because it is considered to be, as it was in the 70s, something by which you lose. Wherever today, as actually they were both explaining and also in the previous session, we can save energy, notably in building, and improve the quality of air, improve the quality of the building itself. And I think that this is an important difference, a very important difference that also should be taken up not only by regulation, but also when you explain regulation.
Yes,
and the support of industry for this is absolutely key.
But as I see it, there's a big difference between retrofitting an old existing building or new build. And I think for the new build, we start to see today that there's new buildings that are 1, 2, 3 years old where we can still go in. And at that time when they were built, they were fulfilling all requirements. And now we can go in and we can, just by changing the fan, making 15 to 20% saving. And of course, there we also dealing directly with the guy that is paying the energy bill, and that always helps a little.
So is it an appeal from you to ask policymakers to also take the commissioning of a building into account and what's the real operation during its lifetime and not just the design?
I think we start to see that with all this certifications of building, green building, LEED, BREEAM certifications, that will become more and more also a part of the certification.
But I think that one of the points of the main challenges, for example, of the new legislation coming up, we were talking earlier about energy audit, for example, is the fact that, yes, okay, you do the audit, but for the moment the legislation says you do the audit, but you are not forced, let's say, to act. Whereas the idea of the energy audit is also to say, well, now you can invest because I show that your building is not effective, is not efficient, or is not saving energy as it could. And I think that that is a very important point, because if legislation remains so uncertain and leaves too much leeway somehow, then the orientation role of it becomes less effective. And it's very much depending on who the people are, the people who believe in it or not.
But then we can see, I mean, customers that we have been with 1.5 or 1 year ago, and offered them a retrofit of their fan, and they are calling now because now the energy prices is coming up. So now they're calling back and said, now it's time. So
But I think here we also know that is it 80% of the building stock that we know today will also be there in 2050. Yes. So retrofitting within the last few years of new build is one challenge, but another challenge is the entire building stock. And how do we actually access that, and how do we together make some solutions for those renovations, and how do we get up the renovation rate, which is far too low at the moment. And that's of course through some solutions that are integrated. So that you bring both the energy efficiency in there, but that you also bring a more healthy building in, because a lot of the old building stock in Europe is also very, very challenged from a health perspective. So there is a challenge there in understanding what are the differences in the solutions between companies. Yeah.
But that will be the beauty if you could combine all that and also more sustainability into, so that it is sustainable solutions that is not only lasting for 3, 4, 5 years, but are actually there for 20 years or more.
Yeah, definitely.
So now we're in a situation where energy prices become more and more a social issue. Energy poverty is becoming more and more social issue also in Europe. Yesterday there was a presentation from a lady from Panama who said, yes, even low-income households are very interested in saving energy, but they see it as a luxury to save energy. So what happens if people are too poor to save energy? So it's a question of affordability. And how far do your solutions contribute to that? I would like to ask you to first, and then Monica, what should be the political answer to enable people to save energy?
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I start here, but I think it's of course there's a geographical challenge here. But if we take in terms of our solutions and the going in that we have, it's that it is really something where we're bringing a value for money, but we are making it accessible. That's our whole going in, that it is accessible for anybody, but also that the benefits that we're actually driving are for free. And it sounds so nice, but that was the founder of Velux who had that great idea that the key benefits, they are from the nature. So that means that it's the natural ventilation and it's the sun that is free out there. Of course, that's not possible with everything, but I think in terms of what you're also talking about, creating sustainable solutions, we need to bring in technologies that are making it affordable to solve some of the challenges that we have.
Yeah, I think, I mean, now we are not making solutions for small households, so but more apartment buildings and so on, and normally there will be other things. But again, I think it's getting...
sometimes say, okay, the municipality is bankrupt, and they could reduce their energy costs for their buildings, but they don't because they don't have the money to invest.
No. That's for everything. That is always a difficult point to come from, especially because then you need to solve something, and then you need to invest, or you need to get subsidized. Or,
but maybe like bringing in third parties like ESCOs or
that's
new kinds of financing.
So I think in the last session that was in here, that was actually, sorry, I didn't catch your point before, but that was actually a little bit the discussion around both OPEX and CAPEX. How do we manage that going forward? Because there will be different situations where you will have this challenge from a building society on the CAPEX side, and finding then some parts that could integrate and partners that can integrate into the solution, because I think then over time you will succeed.
Well, I believe that one has to start from the idea that energy poverty is poverty, and therefore this must be put in the framework of certainly the improvement of the building as such, but also of the quality of living of the different people. So this is not something that you can only solve with grants, but it is very clear that, as a very famous ice cream advertisement said, life is all about priorities. And therefore, you need to prioritize this. In Italy, for example, over the last months, there were about 30 billion euros, and Italy has got a public debt of 150% of the GDP, went in support to paying the bills. And that money would have been very, very, very much needed in order to invest in those poor households, in order to make their bills anyway, go down. And I think that one of the biggest problems today that we have, including in legislation, because as we were talking about, we were saying before, one of the main difficulties that is coming up in the implementation of the Green Deal and of the Fit for 55 package is the fact that some member states are opposing all kinds of innovation or improvement or higher ambition, because they say now with the crisis due to the high energy prices, we cannot afford actually to go more ambition and efficiency, renewable, etc. Whereas the contrary is true, but it is a problem of where you decide to invest. And I think that that is going to be the main message that we ask the industry and also in general civil society organization to give, because this is no luxury. It is actually the way through which you can improve the living condition of these people. It sounds easy, but it is much easier than what a lot of people think.
Okay, we would have room for questions from the audience. If somebody has a spontaneous question. Or in between, I would like also, Monica, to ask you, in Germany, we have more than 50% of the flats are rented out by tenants. So the owner has to invest, whilst the people and the tenants living in the flats, they might profit from energy savings, but they have only limited capacities on their own to bring energy consumption down.
Well,
what has to happen here?
This is a situation which is, of course, very different from country to country. For example, as you know, in Italy, most of the people own their house, so that's, of course, different. But I believe that the French has got a very brilliant idea. And they say that you cannot really rent a certain apartment if it doesn't have a certain level or a certain quality after 2023 or 24. I think that whether we like it or not, that is the direction to go. Because in any case, also some banks are telling us that in mortgage schemes that are making them more, they are actually trying to connect the value of the house to the capacity of this house to become more energy efficient. I think that that is the direction, actually. From one side, to be very strict. You know, when in Italy there was a discussion about that, there was a general, aiuto, no, it's impossible. But it is possible, and it is good, but in order to do that, you need not only regulation, you need a very big awareness from the part of the public authorities, and also an awareness that there are solutions that are actually making your life easier and not more difficult. Because that's why I'm really pushing very much, and this is what we do in EU, is to put together this general interest with the business one, because as far as energy efficiency, this is not that obvious, because indeed, in a building, you need many solutions. You need to have the tenant and the owner sensitize, you need some kind of value given to this. So you need a lot of actors, and it's not simply switching an oil pump or an oil drill or a pipeline. Okay. So I think that is a major, major difference. That's why you need so many actors to work together.
Tina, you've been in between shaking your head and nodding?
No, I'm doing like this. Just to add to this, Monica, if you take in Italy, but in Europe, what is it, 50% who owns their own home? And we do, of course, a lot of study to understand why does a homeowner renovate their buildings. And we see a major shift also even more now after Corona, where people are renovating their homes for energy and because they are now spending more time at home. And the fact that you can support that with the mortgages that are supporting energy renovation, we see a major shift here. And that's, of course, also back to the behavioral changes that we need to see in energy renovation or renovation of your home. And that's back to the behavioral part, because that's the one that we need to trigger in order to get the energy renovation going. But we actually do see that when we ask consumers, why are you renovating? It's very much linked to of course, if they're young, it's because it's their first home. But the way that they spend the money, it is on areas that will later on enable them to sell it at a higher price. And there, the energy rating and the green rating becomes more and more important. So there is a change happening into the renovation, definitely. But that backed up also by, of course, mortgages is an important step.
Okay. I still think there's a lot of things that can be done without. I mean, we are talking about a deep renovation. If you do, there's things, of course, that's costly and have a long payback time. But there's also a lot of things that have shorter,
Yes.
and a lot of things can be done with the current energy prices. 1.5, 2, 3, 4 years payback time, and then I think it's just good business. It's just
quicker.
Yeah.
Okay, there was one question, please. Maybe you introduce yourself and to whom your question is directed.
Yes, of course. My name is Morten Pedersen. I represent the Danish Property Federation, organizing some 85% of the professional real estate sector in Denmark. And I have, first of all, a short comment to Lars, because I was interested in your triangle speak earlier, but I think you have to add administrators to that triangle, making it a rectangle, because there's a difference between owning a building and administering a building, which is very often two different actors, two different parties having very different perspectives on the building and the investments in the building. That point is quite important, I think. Second, to Monica, as representing building owners, of course, I am a bit skeptical on your idea on minimum energy performance standards regarding renting out flats and so. That's my position, of course. But if we walk down that way, we could do that. Such a thought would require massive investments, like massive investments in building stock, even more than we see today, much more than we see today. And that could be doable, perhaps, but that would leave a massive bill to the tenants, because they are the ones who eventually, at the end, will pay. The customers will pay at the end. That's how a market functions. This opens up a huge discussion on other levels: affordability, social implications of this, and this begs the question then: how to solve that question? This is kind of
Okay.
circle and the square trying to.
Before I direct your question to the panelists, I would like to ask you back, what would be your alternative to become climate neutral? Because if you don't invest into climate neutral buildings, that say, okay, keep your high energy bills as an alternative. So it couldn't be an alternative, huh?
I said we walk down that road.
Okay.
But if we do so, we have to have discussion on making these the implications of these investments, how to make them, and who will make them. I'm not saying that the owners will not will do. But if we have to invest at that level, it will have social implications for the tenants.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
As not investment will also have. But still, I will start with you and the question of like multi-stakeholder arrangements where you also have the people operating into housing and owning the assets and so on. So
adding more parties is just making things more complex. So I think that is, but that is, I think it's a fact, and it's also a fact that systems and solutions are also designed more and more to accomplish what is regulated. So what is the house regulation? What do we need as a minimum to fulfill? And that is becoming more and more the standard. So that is also, if we are more ambitious there, then it will become more ambitious.
Well, first of all, I do sympathize very much with your point about administrators. I live in a building there are 60 apartments, and next week I have a meeting with the whole owners in order to throw away one administrator and take another one. So, and this is just one of those nightmare situations in which I do understand. And by the way, we just had that. We had the renewal of our heating and passing from mazout to gas, and now everybody's saying, "Ooh, why did we do that?" Because it's not. Yeah, it's also a question of prices. But heat pumps were 10 years ago were much more difficult, and this shows, that indeed the administration of a certain building and the capacity of going in one direction or the other is also very important, and also is a very important political, work to keep people together. On your issue of minimum standards, I think that here we're really touching the core of what I was telling before about the advertisement about life is all about priorities. Because I think that when we are talking about not only the emissions, but also the quality of the houses and the affordability of the houses, the fact of having a badly insulated house is not something that is more affordable, because you see that what's going on. Of course, you have to make a scheme, and different countries have different schemes. In Italy, they are doing tax reductions. In other countries, they are giving grants. For example, when we were in Poland last week, it is very clear that the mentality there is more grants, than working on fiscal instruments. But before being against a certain provision like minimum standards, possibly we can work on how to make them easier to implement. And I think that is where the dialogue is very important, because just to say, as some of member states opposing to all sorts of things because they are complicated, they do not solve the problem, and they are also imposing on people much bigger cost. I just want to remind that last year, the flooding in Germany and Belgium that basically lasted 24 hours costed more than 9 billion euros. And so this is also going to be paid by people, and not only by authorities. So I think, but this requires a certain capacity of going out of your own. And I had meetings in Belgium with the owners, European organizations, and they are among the most difficult people I ever met in terms of convincing. And I'm sure that that's not the case for you as industrial organization we saw earlier in relation to what I normally hear in my country. But I think that it's a real challenge also for the operators actually to get out of their bulle.
Thank you, Monica. Yeah, thank you to the panel. We need to close this panel, but I think it was a wonderful and positive panel, really pretty much putting emphasis on the benefits, what's in. Monica very much liked life is about doing priorities, and I think, it's now about time. It's not a luxury issue. That's what was clearly found out, and the crisis shouldn't be an excuse where to invest. But still, it's not just about buildings. It's all about people. This is why it was also in the title. It's about the health, but also about activating them and bringing them to collaboration, no matter if they are decision makers in companies, in municipalities, in commercial houses. And we have to do this job done. And yes, I would be very happy if all of the audience could take something away with them. And of course, we also now have a lunch break and a lot of opportunities to follow up on that and to collaborate. And yes, and also there will be some site visits which are also related to buildings. And yes, thank you very much for the great discussion and for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.